The wine glass shattered against marble before anyone could stop it. Clara Voss stood frozen at the head of the table, staring at her own father as he calmly signed documents that would strip her of everything she'd built. But the man who stopped the pen mid-stroke wasn't her lawyer, her board, or her family. It was the quiet single father she'd barely noticed at dinner 3 nights ago. Adrian Cross had just placed a single folder on the table, and her father's face had gone white. What Clara didn't know yet was that this moment had been inevitable since the second Adrian looked at her across that lake house table and saw what no one else ever had. Not the shadow of her sister, but the architect everyone had overlooked. Before we dive into this story, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it honestly makes my day to connect with you. If you're enjoying this already, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Now, let's get into Clara's story, because what happens next changes everything. The lake house sat at the end of a gravel road that wound through bare trees and frozen marshland, the kind of place that looked peaceful in summer and vaguely hostile in February. Clara had driven the 3 hours from the city with her hands tight on the wheel and her sister's voice still ringing in her ears from their last conversation. "You don't have to go, you know. Dad didn't specifically ask for you." That was Vivian's version of concern, pointed, accurate, wrapped in just enough sweetness that you couldn't quite call it cruel. Clara had gone anyway. She always did. The house belonged to Richard Hastings, one of her father's oldest business associates, and someone Clara had met exactly twice in her 30 years. Both times she'd been introduced as Gerald's younger daughter and promptly forgotten. This weekend was supposed to be different, a small gathering, her father had said. Mostly business, but some pleasure. A chance to discuss potential partnerships. He'd even suggested Clara bring portfolio samples of her recent projects. She should have known better. When she pulled up to the circular drive, there were already 4 cars parked in neat angles, their hoods dusted with the fine snow that had started falling an hour ago. Clara grabbed her weekend bag and the leather portfolio case, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest that came with family obligations. The front door opened before she could knock. "Clara, sweetheart, you made it." Her mother stood in the doorway wearing a cream cashmere sweater and that particular smile that meant company was watching. Behind her, the warm glow of the house spilled out into the gray afternoon, along with the sound of conversation and someone laughing. "Hi, Mom." The hug was brief, practiced. Her mother's perfume was the same as always, something French and expensive that Clara could never remember the name of. "Everyone's in the great room. Your father's been looking for you." That was almost certainly not true, but Clara nodded and followed her mother inside. The lake house was exactly what she'd expected. High ceilings, exposed beams, a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the frozen lake, the ice thick and gray under the cloudy sky. The furniture was all leather and dark wood, the kind of carefully curated rustic that cost more than actual rustic ever would. There were perhaps a dozen people scattered around the room. Clara recognized most of them, her father's usual circle, the people who showed up at the same charity galas and country club events year after year. Her father stood near the fireplace, deep in conversation with Richard Hastings and another man Clara didn't know. And there, perched on the arm of a sofa, was Vivian. Her sister looked up and smiled, waving Clara over with the kind of easy grace that had always come so naturally to her. Vivian was wearing dark jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost what Clara made in a week, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves that looked effortless, but definitely weren't. "You're here." Vivian stood and pulled Clara into a hug that felt more genuine than their mother's. "How was the drive?" "Long? Snowy?" "Well, you're just in time. Dinner's in an hour and Dad's already holding court." Vivian's voice dropped slightly. "Fair warning, he's in one of his moods." Clara didn't need to ask what kind of mood. She could see it in the way her father stood, the particular set of his shoulders that meant he was working an angle, playing a long game that wouldn't be obvious until it was already over. "Great. Come on, I'll introduce you to some people." Vivian linked her arm through Clara's and steered her toward a group near the windows. 2 couples, both around her parents' age, talking about someone's ski trip to Aspen. Clara smiled and nodded through the introductions, already feeling herself sliding into the familiar role. Vivian's quieter sister, Gerald's other daughter, the one who worked in architecture but not the exciting kind. She was saved from further small talk by Richard Hastings, calling everyone to attention. "If I could have your attention, folks, dinner's about ready, but I wanted to make one more introduction before we head in." Clara glanced toward the entrance and saw a man she hadn't noticed before. He was standing slightly apart from the group, hands in his pockets, watching the room with the kind of careful stillness that suggested he was taking everything in without seeming to. He was younger than most of the guests, early 30s maybe. Dark hair, worn a little longer than the corporate standard, dark pants and a simple sweater, no tie. There was something deliberately understated about him, like he'd chosen to blend in without actually trying to impress anyone. "This is Adrian Cross," Richard continued. "Old friend of mine, despite the age gap. Adrian's in town consulting on a project, and I twisted his arm into joining us this weekend." A few polite chuckles. Adrian smiled slightly, the kind of expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Adrian, you've met most of the group, but let me do a proper round of names." Clara half listened as Richard went through the introductions. She was more interested in watching Adrian's reaction to each person, the way he shook hands, the way he seemed to measure each interaction without being obvious about it. When Richard got to her and Vivian, something shifted. "And these are Gerald's daughters, Vivian and Clara." Vivian stepped forward first, extending her hand with that megawatt smile. "Adrian, Richard's told us absolutely nothing about you, so you're going to have to fill in the blanks." "Not much to tell." Adrian shook her hand briefly. "I consult. I travel too much. I'm probably boring everyone already." "I doubt that." Vivian's smile widened slightly, and Clara felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Then Adrian turned to her. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his palm warm. "Clara." "Hi." For a second, his eyes held hers, gray, she noticed, or maybe blue depending on the light, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Not attraction, not dismissal, just attention, real attention. Then the moment passed, and he was moving on to the next introduction, and Clara was left standing there feeling oddly unsettled. Dinner was served in a long dining room with another massive fireplace and more windows overlooking the lake. Clara found herself seated between one of her father's golf buddies and a woman she vaguely remembered from some charity board or another. Vivian was across the table next to Adrian, already deep in conversation about something that had them both smiling. Clara picked at her salad and tried not to watch. "So Clara," the golf buddy said, clearly making an effort. "Your dad tells me you're in architecture." "I am." "What kind of projects do you work on?" "Mostly commercial, some residential. Right now I'm finishing up plans for a community center downtown." "Oh, that's nice. Vivian mentioned she's working on something in the arts district." Of course she had. "That's interior design," Clara said, keeping her voice neutral. "Different field." "Oh, sure, but you two must collaborate sometimes." "Not really." The conversation died there, and Clara was grateful when the main course arrived and gave everyone something to focus on besides small talk. She was halfway through her salmon when her father's voice carried down the table. "Adrian, Richard tells me you're working on the Meridian acquisition. That's a complicated piece of business." Clara glanced up. Adrian was cutting his food with careful precision, not looking at her father. "It has some moving parts." "I'd say so. The debt structure alone is a nightmare." "It's manageable if you know what you're looking for." Her father smiled, the expression sharp. "You sound confident." "I'm thorough." There was a beat of silence, something shifting in the dynamic that Clara couldn't quite name. Her father was used to people deferring to him, agreeing with him, positioning themselves carefully in relation to his opinions. Adrian wasn't doing any of that. He wasn't being confrontational exactly, but he wasn't giving ground either. "Well," her father said finally, "I look forward to seeing how it plays out. I'm sure you'll hear about it." The conversation moved on, but Clara kept watching Adrian from the corner of her eye. He ate slowly, contributed occasionally to the discussion around him, and seemed completely unbothered by her father's subtle attempts to establish dominance. It was Vivian who brought the tension to a head, though she probably didn't mean to. "You know what's funny?" she said, her voice bright and carrying easily across the table. "Claire and I were just talking about this last week, how different we are. She's the serious one. I'm the creative one. She's got the head for numbers and structures. I've got the eye for aesthetics. A few people chuckled. Clara felt her jaw tighten. I always tell people, Vivian continued, clearly warming to her theme, that if you want something built right, ask Clara. If you want it to look good, ask me. More laughter. Clara stared at her plate. That's selling yourself short, Vivian, their mother said. You both have wonderful talents. Oh, I know. I just mean we're wired differently. Like, Clara could never do what I do. She doesn't have the personality for client relations. And I could never do what she does because I'd die of boredom looking at building codes all day. The table laughed again. Clara felt heat rising in her face, the familiar mixture of embarrassment and anger that she'd spent 30 years trying to manage. I think, her father said, his voice indulgent, you're both exceptional in your own ways. Exactly, Vivian agreed. We complement each other. Clara's the brain, I'm the heart. Clara set down her fork carefully, precisely. She could feel Vivian's eyes on her, that familiar mix of affection and condescension that her sister somehow managed to convey simultaneously. I just think it's important, Vivian said, still smiling, to know your strengths. Clara knows she's not the front-facing type, and that's okay. Not everyone can be. The words hung in the air, wrapped in sweetness, but cutting just the same. Clara opened her mouth to say what she didn't know. Something. Anything. But before she could find the words, a voice cut through the moment. I disagree. Everyone turned. Adrian was looking directly at Vivian, his expression polite but firm. I'm sorry? Vivian's smile flickered. You said Clara's not the front-facing type. I disagree. The table had gone very quiet. Clara's heart was pounding. I just meant, Vivian started. I know what you meant. Adrian's voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. But I've watched Clara all evening, and she's been the most observant person at this table. She listens before she speaks. She thinks before she reacts. Those aren't weaknesses. They're rare skills. Clara couldn't breathe. Vivian's smile had frozen in place. You're making assumptions, Adrian continued, about what kind of personality succeeds in client relations. But the best professionals I've ever worked with weren't the loudest or the most charismatic. They were the ones who actually paid attention, the ones who saw what other people missed. He paused, then looked directly at Clara for the first time since the conversation started. And I've been watching this room all night. I wasn't looking at your sister. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite hope, not quite belief, but something close to both. Vivian was staring at Adrian with her mouth slightly open. Their father's expression had gone very still. Well, Richard Hastings said, clearing his throat, that's certainly a perspective. It's the only one that matters to me, Adrian said. He picked up his water glass, took a sip, and went back to his dinner as if he'd just commented on the weather. The conversation eventually restarted, other people filling the silence with safer topics, but Clara barely heard any of it. She was staring at her plate, her pulse racing, replaying those words over and over. I wasn't looking at your sister. After dinner, people scattered, some to the great room for drinks, others out onto the covered porch despite the cold. Clara escaped to the kitchen under the pretense of helping clean up, needing a moment alone to process what had just happened. She was loading glasses into the dishwasher when she heard footsteps behind her. Hey! She turned. Adrian was standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets again, that same careful stillness about him. Hi. I hope I didn't make things weird at dinner. Clara let out a breath that was almost a laugh. You definitely made things weird. Sorry. Don't be. She closed the dishwasher and turned to face him fully. Why did you say that? About me? Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her with those gray-blue eyes. Because it was true. You don't know me. No, but I know when someone's being underestimated. The words hit harder than they should have. Clara felt her throat tighten. Vivian didn't mean... She's not trying to be cruel. That's just how we've always been. That doesn't make it right. She's my sister. I know. Adrian moved further into the kitchen, leaning against the counter a few feet away. But that doesn't mean she gets to define who you are, or who you're capable of being. Clara wanted to argue, to defend Vivian, to fall back into the familiar pattern of making excuses. But standing there in the quiet kitchen with this stranger who'd somehow seen through 30 years of family dynamics in a single evening, she couldn't find the words. "I should go check on my daughter," Adrian said after a moment. "She's upstairs with Richard's housekeeper, but I don't like leaving her too long." "You have a daughter?" "Emma. She's 6. Something in his expression softened. "She didn't want to stay home this weekend, so Richard said I could bring her. She's probably talked his housekeeper's ear off by now." "That's sweet." "That's Emma." Adrian pushed off from the counter. "Anyway, I just wanted to make sure I hadn't overstepped." You didn't." He nodded, started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "For what it's worth, Clara, the community center you mentioned at dinner, I looked up your firm while everyone was having cocktails. Your portfolio is impressive, really impressive." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just stop letting other people make you think you need to." Then he was gone, and Clara was alone in the kitchen with the sound of the dishwasher and a feeling in her chest she couldn't quite name. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clara made appearances in the great room, nursed a glass of wine she barely touched, and avoided extended conversation with anyone. Vivian tried to catch her eye several times, her expression uncertain, but Clara wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Around 11, people started drifting off to bed. The lake house had 8 guest rooms, and Clara's was on the second floor at the end of a long hallway. She escaped gratefully, closing the door behind her and leaning against it with her eyes closed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "Are we okay?" Clara stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone down without responding. She changed into pajamas and sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window at the dark lake beyond. The snow had picked up, fat flakes drifting past the glass, and she could just barely make out the shapes of the trees on the far shore. "I wasn't looking at your sister." The words played on repeat in her mind, impossible to ignore or dismiss. Because the thing was, she believed him. Not because she wanted to, not because it was flattering, but because there had been something in the way he'd said it, a certainty that left no room for doubt. Clara didn't sleep well that night. She drifted in and out, her mind churning through the evening, replaying conversations and looks, and the weight of all the years before this one. When she finally gave up around 6:30 and got dressed, the house was still quiet. She made her way downstairs, thinking she'd make coffee and maybe take a walk before everyone else woke up. But when she reached the kitchen, she found Adrian already there, standing at the counter with a mug in his hands. "Morning," he said. "Morning." "Coffee's fresh if you want some." "Thanks." She poured herself a cup and they stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the house's heating system. "Couldn't sleep?" Adrian asked. "Not really. You?" "Emma's an early riser. I'm used to it by now." "Where is she?" "Still upstairs, watching cartoons on my laptop. She'll be down in a bit demanding pancakes." Clara smiled despite herself. "Sounds like a good kid." "She is." Adrian took a sip of his coffee, then looked at her directly. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Last night at dinner, how long has that dynamic been going on? With your sister?" Clara felt her stomach tighten. "I don't know. Always, I guess. It's just how we are." "It's not how you are. It's how she frames you." "That's not fair. Vivian doesn't—" "I'm not trying to attack your sister," Adrian interrupted gently. "I'm trying to understand why someone as clearly capable as you keeps accepting a narrative that sells you short." Clara set down her mug, suddenly angry in a way she couldn't quite articulate. "You don't know anything about my family." "You're right, I don't. So maybe don't make assumptions about dynamics you don't understand." "Okay." The ease of his agreement somehow made it worse. Clara felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes and turned away, furious with herself. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment. I shouldn't have snapped at you." "It's fine." "No, it's not. You were trying to be kind, and I bit your head off." "Clara," his voice was quiet but firm, "you don't owe me an apology for having feelings about your own family." She turned back to find him watching her with that same careful attention from the night before, not pitying, not judging, just seeing her. "I don't know how to explain it," she said finally. "Vivian and we've always been different. She's always been the one everyone notices, and I'm the one who isn't." And I've made peace with that. I have my work. I have my life. I don't need to be the center of attention. There's a difference between not needing attention and being systematically diminished. She doesn't mean to diminish me. Intent doesn't change impact. The words hung between them, simple and undeniable. Clara felt something shift in her chest, something that had been locked down for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, "I told you last night, I know what it looks like when someone's being underestimated. I spent most of my 20s being the youngest person in every room, watching people dismiss me before I'd even open my mouth. I know what that does to you, how it makes you question yourself even when you know you're right. How did you stop?" "I didn't, not completely, but I learned to recognize it when it was happening. And I learned that the people who underestimate you are usually the ones who need you to stay small so they can feel big." Before Clara could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. A moment later, a small girl appeared in the doorway, dark curly hair, bright eyes, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon astronauts. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Adrian's entire demeanor shifted, softening in a way that made him look younger. "Good morning to you too, Emma Bear." "Morning." The girl noticed Clara and smiled shyly. "Hi." "Hi," Clara said. "I'm Clara. Are you staying here too?" "I am." "Do you like pancakes?" "I do. Daddy makes really good pancakes, but he always burns the first one." "That's because the first pancake is a sacrifice to the pancake," Adrian said seriously. "Everyone knows that." Emma giggled, and Clara felt something warm unfold in her chest, watching them together. The rest of the morning passed in a strange, suspended kind of normalcy. More people filtered down for breakfast. Richard's housekeeper, a cheerful woman named Margaret, took over pancake duty while Adrian and Emma settled at the kitchen table with coloring books. Clara found herself drawn into the scene, sitting across from them and watching Emma's serious concentration as she colored a picture of a rocket ship. "Are you an astronaut?" Clara asked. Emma looked up, considering the question with the gravity of someone much older. "Not yet, but I'm going to be when I grow up. Daddy says if I work really hard and study math and science, I can do anything." "Daddy's right." "What do you do?" "I'm an architect. I design buildings. Like houses, sometimes, and other things too. Offices, stores, community centers." "Do you like it?" The question was so simple, so direct, that Clara found herself pausing to really consider it. "Yeah," she said finally. "I really do." "Then you're lucky," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Daddy says lots of grown-ups don't like their jobs." Adrian met Clara's eyes over his daughter's head, something like understanding passing between them. The rest of the weekend unfolded in layers. There were more meals, more conversations, more moments of her father working angles Clara couldn't quite see yet. Vivian tried several times to pull her aside, but Clara kept finding excuses to avoid it. And through it all, she found herself increasingly aware of Adrian, not in a romantic way exactly, but in the way you notice someone who's fundamentally altered your perspective on something you thought you'd figured out long ago. On Sunday morning, as people started packing up and saying their goodbyes, Clara found Adrian and Emma by the front door. "Heading out?" she asked. "Yeah, we've got a long drive back." Adrian was buckling Emma into her coat, the little girl chattering about something she'd seen on the lake earlier. "Thank you," Clara said quietly, "for what you said at dinner and yesterday morning. I meant it." "I know. That's why it mattered." Adrian straightened, studying her face. "What are you going to do?" "About what?" "About the fact that you know you're being sold short." Clara didn't have an answer to that. Not yet. "Think about it," Adrian said. Then, with a small smile, "And maybe start by reading your own portfolio. Really reading it. You might surprise yourself." He and Emma left, and Clara stood in the doorway watching their car disappear down the gravel drive. Behind her, she heard her father's voice. "Clara, could you join me in the study? There's something I'd like to discuss." And just like that, the weekend shifted into something else entirely. Her father's study was at the back of the lake house, a smaller room with dark paneling and built-in bookshelves that looked like they'd never actually been read. Gerald Voss sat behind Richard's mahogany desk like he owned it, which was probably how he approached most spaces he occupied. "Close the door, would you?" Clara did, then took the chair across from him without waiting to be asked. Something about the weekend, about Adrian's words, about seeing herself through someone else's eyes, had shifted something fundamental. She was tired of waiting for permission. Her father didn't seem to notice. He was shuffling through a leather folder, pulling out what looked like financial documents. "I wanted to talk to you about the business," he said. "Your business, specifically." Clara felt her spine straighten. "What about it?" "Well, I've been looking at your numbers, the contracts you've taken on, your overhead, your projected growth." He looked up, his expression somewhere between concerned and disappointed. "I'm worried, Clara. You're stretched thin." "I'm managing fine." "Are you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're one bad quarter away from serious trouble." The words hit exactly where they were supposed to. Clara had been worried about the same thing for months. The community center project had eaten up more resources than she'd anticipated, and 2 other clients had pushed their timelines back, leaving her cash flow tighter than she'd like. "I appreciate your concern," she said carefully, "but I've got it under control." "Do you?" Her father leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Because I've been talking to some people, and there might be an opportunity here. A way to stabilize your company, give you some breathing room." "What kind of opportunity?" "A partnership. You'd bring your expertise and your client relationships, and I'd provide the financial backing and infrastructure. We could fold your operation into one of my existing subsidiaries. You'd maintain creative control, of course, but you'd have the resources of a much larger organization behind you." Clara's heart was pounding. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like help. It sounded exactly like what she'd been telling herself she needed, and every instinct she had was screaming that something was wrong. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "You've never shown interest in my work before. Why now?" "Because you're my daughter, and I don't want to see you fail." "I'm not failing." "Not yet. But Clara, be realistic. You're competing against firms with 10 times your resources. How long can you sustain that?" She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the numbers were real, the pressure was real, and her father had just put words to every fear she'd been carrying for months. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course, take your time." He slid the folder across the desk. "These are the preliminary terms. Look them over, talk to your accountant if you want. But Clara, don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't stay open forever." She took the folder with hands that wanted to shake and didn't. "Is that all?" "That's all." "Oh, and Clara?" He smiled, the expression warm and paternal, and somehow making her skin crawl. "I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I am. You've built something real. I just want to help you protect it." Clara left the study feeling like she'd just been in a car accident, but couldn't identify what had actually hit her. She went straight to her room, closed the door, and opened the folder. The terms looked generous on the surface. Financial backing, access to her father's network, shared resources. But the more she read, the more wrong it felt. The control structures were vague, the timeline for integration was aggressive, and buried in the 3rd page was a clause about decision-making authority that would effectively put her father in charge of any major strategic choice. She was still reading when her phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Clara? It's Adrian Cross. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from Richard." Her pulse jumped. "No, it's fine. Is everything okay?" "That depends. Are you alone right now?" She glanced at the closed door. "Yes? Why?" "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you not to react in a way that anyone watching you would notice. Can you do that?" Ice flooded her veins. "What's going on?" "Your father is setting you up." The words hung in the air. Clara realized she was holding her breath. "I'm listening," she said. "The partnership he just offered you, it's not a partnership, it's a takeover. I've seen the structure before. He's going to fold your company into his subsidiary, assume your debts, and within 6 months he'll have positioned himself to force you out entirely. You'll lose everything." How do you know about the partnership? He just told me 20 minutes ago." "Because I've been tracking him. Not you. Him. That's why I was at the lake house this weekend." Clara's mind was racing. "I don't understand. You said you were consulting on a project." "I am. Your father is the project." You need to explain, right now. She heard Adrian take a breath. 3 months ago, I was hired by a group of investors who got burned in a deal with your father. They wanted to know how he'd managed to legally strip them of assets they thought were protected. I started digging, and I found a pattern. Your father has been doing this for years, identifying vulnerable businesses, usually family-owned, offering partnerships that look generous but are structured to give him complete control. Once he has that control, he systematically transfers the valuable assets and leaves the original owners with nothing but debt. Clara felt sick. That's not possible. My father he's successful, but he's not a criminal. He's very good at staying just inside the legal boundaries. Everything is technically above board, but morally, ethically, he's been destroying people for profit. Why should I believe you? Because you already don't trust the deal he offered. You're smart enough to know something's wrong. I'm just confirming what your instincts are already telling you. Clara looked down at the folder in her lap. The generous terms, the vague language, the control buried in the fine print. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Nothing. I want to help you. Why? Adrian was silent for a moment. Because I meant what I said at dinner. You're being underestimated, and it's making you vulnerable. And because I've watched your father operate for 3 months now, and I know what he does to people, I don't want you to be the next casualty. This is insane. You're telling me my own father is trying to steal my company. I'm telling you your father sees an opportunity and he's taking it. Whether he thinks of it as stealing or just good business, I can't say. But the outcome is the same. Clara stood up, pacing to the window. The lake stretched out below, gray and frozen, and offering no answers. What am I supposed to do? First, don't sign anything. Second, get copies of all your corporate documents, articles of incorporation, shareholder agreements, everything. Third, we need to meet, somewhere your father won't see us. When? Tomorrow. There's a coffee shop called Bennett's about 2 miles from your office. Do you know it? Yes. Meet me there at 9. Bring the documents. And Clara, don't tell anyone. Not your sister, not your mother, no one. I know this is a lot. I know you don't know me, and you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to trust yourself. Trust what you're feeling right now. Does that deal your father offered feel right? Clara closed her eyes. No. Then meet me tomorrow. Let me show you what I've found. After that, you can make your own decision about what to do. He hung up before she could respond. Clara stood at the window for a long time, watching the snow fall, the folder heavy in her hands. Downstairs she could hear voices. Her mother laughing at something, Vivian's bright chatter, her father's deeper tones mixing with Richard's. Her family. Her father. She thought about the years of being overlooked, dismissed, positioned as the lesser daughter. She thought about Vivian's casual cruelties wrapped in affection. She thought about her mother's careful neutrality that always somehow supported her father's version of things. And she thought about Adrian's eyes across the dinner table, the certainty in his voice when he said he hadn't been looking at Vivian. Clara left the lake house an hour later, pleading a work emergency she needed to handle. Her father barely looked up from his conversation. Her mother kissed her cheek. Vivian texted her 3 times on the drive back to the city, and Clara ignored all of them. The next morning, she arrived at Bennett's 15 minutes early, a messenger bag full of documents she'd pulled from her office files at 7 a.m. The coffee shop was small and warm, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Clara ordered tea she didn't want and took a table in the back corner. Adrian arrived exactly at 9, Emma in tow. "I'm sorry," he said, unbuttoning his coat. "My sitter canceled last minute. Emma, can you sit here and work on your math workbook for a bit? Daddy needs to talk to Clara about grown-up stuff." "Okay." Emma climbed into a chair and pulled out a workbook covered in unicorn stickers. "Hi, Clara." "Hi, Emma." Adrian ordered coffee and joined Clara at the table, pulling a laptop from his bag. "Did you bring the documents?" She slid the messenger bag across the table. He opened it, glanced through the contents, and nodded. "Good. These are what I need." He opened his laptop and turned it so she could see the screen. "This is what I've compiled over the last 3 months." What followed was 45 minutes of the most meticulous investigation Clara had ever seen. Adrian walked her through a dozen different deals, showing her the pattern in excruciating detail. The initial approach, always framed as help or partnership. The contract terms that looked generous but contained subtle vulnerabilities. The systematic transfer of assets once control was established. The final outcome? Always the same. The original owner forced out, left with debt and legal fees and nothing else. This company here, Adrian said, pointing to one file, was owned by a man named Thomas Chen. He'd built it over 20 years. Your father offered to help him expand into new markets. 18 months later, Chen lost everything. He's working as a consultant now, trying to rebuild. Did you talk to him? I talked to all of them. 11 business owners over the last 8 years. Some of them still don't fully understand what happened to them. Clara felt numb. Why hasn't anyone sued him? Some tried. Your father has very good lawyers, and everything he does is technically legal. Unethical as hell, but legal. The contracts people sign give him exactly the authority he needs to do what he does. And you think he's planning to do this to me? I don't think. I know. Adrian pulled up another document. Look at this. 3 weeks ago, your father started making inquiries with some of his banking contacts about your company's financial position. He's been researching your debt load, your contracts, your vulnerabilities. This isn't opportunistic, Clara. This is planned. She stared at the screen, seeing her company's name in her father's notes, seeing herself reduced to numbers and opportunities and strategic positioning. Daddy, I'm hungry. Emma looked up from her workbook. Can I have a muffin? Sure, Bear. Adrian pulled out his wallet and handed her a 10. Go pick one and tell the nice lady at the counter I said you could have it. Emma skipped off to the counter. Clara watched her go, this small, innocent thing, in a world that suddenly felt much darker. I don't know what to do, she said quietly. You have options. The first is to simply refuse the partnership. He can't force you. But he's right about one thing. I am stretched thin. I do need help. Then find it somewhere else. Get a business loan, bring in an investor who isn't your father, take on a partner with an actual partnership structure. That takes time. Time I might not have. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. Can I ask you something? Why did you start your own firm in the first place? The question caught her off guard. What? You could have joined an established company. You're good enough that you'd have had your pick. Why go out on your own? Clara was quiet for a moment, remembering. Because I was tired of being invisible, tired of doing the work and watching other people take credit. I wanted to build something that was mine. And how would you feel if that something became your father's instead? The answer was immediate and visceral. I'd rather burn it down. Then don't give it to him. Emma returned with a chocolate chip muffin the size of her head and climbed back into her chair, humming to herself as she picked at it. Clara looked at Adrian across the table, this man she'd met 3 days ago, who'd somehow become the only person she felt she could trust. Why are you doing this? You said you were hired by investors to investigate my father. This is beyond that. It started as an investigation, but then I met you, and I saw what was happening, and I couldn't just walk away. That's not an answer. Adrian glanced at Emma, then back at Clara. When my wife died, I had a lot of people offer to help. Most of them meant well. Some of them tried to take advantage. There are always people who see grief as an opportunity. I learned pretty quickly to tell the difference between someone who wants to help and someone who wants to use you. Your father is using you, Clara, and I know what it feels like to be used by someone you thought you could trust. The rawness in his voice made Clara's throat tight. I'm sorry. About your wife. Thank you. It was 3 years ago, car accident. Emma doesn't remember her much, which is its own kind of heartbreak. He shook his head. My point is, I recognize predatory behavior when I see it, and I hate watching it happen. Clara looked down at the documents spread across the table. Her company, her work, her life. What do I do? She asked again. First, you need to secure your position. Make sure all your corporate documents are in order. Verify that you have the sole authority to make decisions. Second, you need to understand exactly how bad your financial situation is. Not what your father thinks it is, what it actually is. Third, you need to figure out if there are legitimate options for stabilizing your company that don't involve him. And fourth, you need to decide how much you're willing to fight. Because if you refuse his offer, he's not going to just accept it. He's going to push. Clara thought about her father's face in the study, the warmth in his voice when he said he was proud of her, the way he'd framed everything as help, as concern, as love. "He's my father," she said quietly. "I know. How do I fight my own father?" "The same way you fight anyone who's trying to take something from you. You stand your ground and you don't give in." Emma had finished her muffin and was watching them both with the solemn attention of someone who didn't understand the words but knew the tone mattered. "Clara looks sad," she said to her father. "She's dealing with some hard stuff, Bear. Is someone being mean to her?" "Something like that." Emma considered this, then reached across the table and patted Clara's hand with sticky fingers. "It's okay. Daddy's really good at fixing things." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back. "Thank you, Emma." They spent another hour going through the details. Adrian showed her exactly what to look for in her father's proposal, the specific language that would give him control. He helped her draft a list of questions for her accountant and her lawyer. He gave her contact information for 2 investors he knew personally who specialized in small business growth capital. "These aren't sharks," he said. "They're people who genuinely want to help companies succeed. Talk to them. See what your options are." When they finally left the coffee shop, Clara felt like she'd been put through an emotional meat grinder. But she also felt something else, a clarity she hadn't had in months, maybe years. Adrian walked her to her car, Emma holding his hand and talking about the pigeon she'd seen on the sidewalk. "Call me if anything changes," he said. "And Clara, trust yourself. You're smarter and stronger than your father thinks you are. Don't forget that." She drove back to her office and spent the rest of the day going through everything with fresh eyes. The numbers that had seemed overwhelming suddenly looked manageable. The problems that had felt insurmountable suddenly had potential solutions. By the time she left that evening, she'd made 3 decisions. First, she was going to talk to both investors Adrian had recommended. Second, she was going to have her lawyer review her father's proposal line by line. And third, she wasn't going to sign anything until she was absolutely certain she understood every implication. Her phone rang as she was unlocking her apartment door. Vivian. Clara almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hey. Finally, I've been trying to reach you all day." Vivian sounded annoyed. "Where have you been?" "Working. What's up?" "Dad wants to have dinner tomorrow night." "Family thing. He said to make sure you're there." Clara's stomach tightened. "Did he say what it's about?" "No, but he seemed excited. Mom thinks he's going to announce something." "About what?" "I don't know, Clara. That's why it's called an announcement." Vivian paused. "Are you okay? You've been weird since the lake house." "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." "Vivian, I really can't do this right now." "Do what?" "I'm just trying to—" "I have to go. I'll see you tomorrow." Clara hung up before her sister could respond. She went inside, poured herself a glass of wine she didn't drink, and sat in the dark looking at her city through the window. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Adrian. "Remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting yourself, not even family." She stared at the message for a long time before responding. "How did you know I needed to hear that?" His reply came immediately. "Because I know what it's like to feel guilty for doing the right thing." The next evening, Clara arrived at her parents' house in the suburbs exactly 15 minutes late. She'd debated not coming at all, but Adrian had been clear. Refusing to engage would only make her father suspicious. Better to play along while she figured out her next move. Her mother opened the door with her usual perfect smile. "Clara, sweetheart, we were starting to worry." "Traffic." Inside, she found Vivian in the living room, already on her second glass of wine, and her father standing by the fireplace looking pleased with himself. "There she is." Gerald came over and kissed her cheek. "How's my brilliant daughter?" The word made her skin crawl now. "Busy?" "That's what I want to talk about. But first, let's eat. Your mother made that salmon you like." Dinner was excruciating. Her father dominated the conversation, talking about a new development project he was considering, asking Vivian about her latest design clients, making jokes that everyone laughed at because he expected them to. Clara pushed food around her plate and tried to look engaged. Finally, over dessert, her father cleared his throat. So I wanted to gather everyone tonight because I have some exciting news. Claire and I have been discussing a partnership. She's going to be bringing her architecture firm into the family business. Vivian's face lit up. Really? Clara, that's amazing. We haven't finalized anything, Clara said carefully. Just a matter of paperwork at this point. Her father smiled at her. I've had my lawyers draw up the contracts. We can sign them this week and start the integration process immediately. Clara felt the trap closing. He was boxing her in, using her family as witnesses, creating social pressure to comply. Actually, she said, I've been thinking about it, and I have some concerns about the structure. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Concerns? Her father's smile didn't waver, but something hardened in his eyes. What kind of concerns? The decision-making authority, mainly. I'd like to maintain more control over the strategic direction. Clara, we discussed this. You'd have creative control. I'd handle the business side. That's not what the contract says. Silence. Her mother was looking between them, confused. Vivian had gone very still. I think, her father said slowly, that perhaps you're misunderstanding some of the legal language. These are standard terms. I showed them to my lawyer. She didn't think they were standard at all. Now the smile was completely gone. You showed them to your lawyer? I thought we were keeping this in the family until everything was settled. It is in the family. I'm protecting my company. From what? From me? Her father laughed, but there was no humor in it. Clara, I'm trying to help you. You're acting like I'm the enemy. I'm acting like someone who wants to understand what she's signing before she signs it. This is ridiculous. Gerald, what's she talking about? Her mother's voice was sharp with confusion. It's nothing, darling. Clara's just being paranoid. I'm being cautious. There's a difference. Her father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Clara, I think you need to take a step back and really think about what you're doing here. You're letting fear cloud your judgment. I'm offering you a lifeline, and you're treating it like a threat. Maybe because it is one. The words hung in the air. Vivian gasped. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. How dare you, her father said quietly. After everything I've done for you, everything I've given you, you stand in my house and accuse me of what exactly? Clara's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying I need more time to think about this. You don't have more time. The offer expires at the end of the week. Then I guess I'd better make a decision quickly. She stood up, grabbing her purse. Her mother was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Vivian looked genuinely distressed. Clara, wait, Vivian started. I have to go. You walk out that door, her father said, his voice cold. And don't expect me to extend this offer again. Clara met his eyes. For the first time in her life, she saw him clearly. Not as her father, not as the man she'd spent 30 years trying to please, but as exactly what Adrian had showed her. A predator. A strategist. Someone who saw her vulnerability and planned to exploit it. I'll take my chances, she said. She made it to her car before she started shaking. Clara sat in her car for 20 minutes before her hands stopped shaking enough to drive. Her phone was already lighting up with texts. 3 from Vivian, 2 from her mother, none from her father. She didn't read any of them. Instead, she called Adrian. He picked up on the second ring. Clara? I just walked out of dinner at my parents' house. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and tight. He tried to pressure me into signing, in front of everyone. Made it seem like it was already decided. Are you okay? I don't know. No. Maybe. She pressed her palm against her forehead. He gave me until the end of the week, said the offer expires. That's a pressure tactic. He's trying to force you into a decision before you have time to explore other options. It's working. Where are you right now? Still in their driveway. Can you drive? Yes. Then go home. Lock your door. Don't answer any calls except mine. I need to make some calls myself, and then we need to talk. Adrian, trust me, I'm not going to let him do this. He hung up. Clara sat there for another moment, then started the car and drove home through streets that felt surreal, like she was watching her own life from outside her body. By the time she got to her apartment, Vivian had called twice and left a voicemail. Clara deleted it without listening. She poured herself wine, then poured it down the sink because her hands were still unsteady. She sat on her couch in the dark and waited for Adrian to call back. He didn't call. He showed up. The knock came at 9:30. Clara checked the peephole and found Adrian standing in her hallway, still wearing his coat, looking tired. She opened the door. "How did you know where I live?" "Richard Hastings had the guest list with addresses. I'm sorry for just showing up, but we need to talk, and I didn't want to do this over the phone." He paused. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Adrian came in and looked around at her apartment. Small, neat, furnished with pieces she'd collected over years of finding things she actually liked instead of things that matched. Nothing like her parents' house. "Where's Emma?" Clara asked. "With my sister. I called in a favor." He turned to face her. "Clara, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "After you called, I made some calls to people I know in banking. Your father has been moving pieces around for the last 2 weeks. He's been positioning himself for this." "I don't understand." "He's been talking to your creditors, quietly, making inquiries about purchasing your outstanding debts. If he does that, he can call them due immediately, force you into default." The room tilted. Clara sat down hard on the couch. "He can do that?" "If he owns the debt, yes. And if you default, your company becomes vulnerable to forced acquisition by creditors, which would be him. So even if I don't sign his deal, he can take my company anyway. That's what he's setting up. The partnership offer was always meant to be the easy way. If you refuse, he's prepared to do it the hard way." Clara felt something crack inside her chest. "Why? Why would he do this to me?" Adrian sat down beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Because he sees an opportunity. Because he can. Because, in his mind, it's not personal, it's just business. But I'm his daughter." "I know. Doesn't that mean anything?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I think it means something to him, just not what it should." Clara put her face in her hands. She wanted to cry but couldn't find the tears. She just felt hollow, scraped out, like someone had reached inside and removed something essential. "What do I do?" she asked through her fingers. "We fight back." "How?" "You just told me he's got me trapped no matter what I choose." "He thinks he does. But he's made a mistake." Clara looked up. "What mistake?" "He assumed you'd fold. He assumed that when you understood how cornered you were, you'd just give in. That's what everyone else did." Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "But you're not everyone else, and I have something he doesn't know about." "What?" "Proof. Documented proof of his pattern of behavior, and more importantly, proof that he's been doing it to you specifically. The conversations with your creditors, the financial research, the timeline of his moves. I've been building a case against him for 3 months, but it was all circumstantial until now. The fact that he's targeting his own daughter, using family trust as a weapon, that's the piece I needed." Clara's mind was racing. "But you said everything he does is technically legal." "It is, but legal doesn't mean unassailable. If we can prove pattern and intent, if we can show that he's been systematically manipulating family relationships for financial gain, we can do 2 things. First, we can make it ugly enough that he backs off because the reputational damage isn't worth it. Second, we can warn your creditors what he's actually trying to do, which makes them a lot less likely to play along." "Why would they care?" "Because banks don't like being used as weapons in family feuds. It's bad press. If we can show them that your father is manipulating them into foreclosing on you just so he can swoop in and acquire your company, they'll think twice. They'd rather work with you directly on restructuring your debt than be complicit in what would look like financial elder abuse if this ever became public." "I'm 30. That's not elder abuse." "No, but it's familial financial manipulation, and that plays almost as badly in the press. Your father has built a reputation as a successful businessman. That reputation is valuable to him. If we threaten it, we have leverage." Clara tried to process this. The idea of weaponizing her family drama, of making this public, made her feel sick. But the alternative was losing everything she'd built. "I need to think," she said. "You have until Friday. That's 4 days." "That's not enough time." "It's what we have." Adrian stood up. "I'm going to work through the night pulling together everything I have. Tomorrow morning, I want you to meet with both investors I recommended. Tell them what's happening, see what they can offer you. And if they can't help, then we go to Plan B. What's Plan B? We'll figure it out. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Clara, I know this is overwhelming. I know it feels impossible, but I need you to hold on for 4 more days. Can you do that? She thought about her father's face at dinner, the cold finality in his voice when he said the offer would expire, the 30 years of being diminished and overlooked that had led to this moment. Yeah, she said, I can do that. Adrian left, and Clara spent the night lying awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to find a version of the future that didn't end with her father winning. The next morning, she met with the first investor at a breakfast place downtown. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with an easy smile and the kind of presence that suggested competence without arrogance. Adrian called me last night, he said after they'd ordered. Gave me the basic situation. Sounds like you're in a tight spot. That's one way to put it. Tell me about your company. Not the financials yet. I'll get to that. Tell me what you've built and why it matters to you. So Clara did. And somehow, talking about her projects, about the community center and the mixed-use development she'd designed and the small office building that had won an award she'd never told her family about, she felt something loosen in her chest. Marcus listened without interrupting, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention. When she finished, he pulled out a tablet and started walking through numbers. Your debt load is manageable, he said. Not great, but not catastrophic. You've got good contracts lined up, solid references, real growth potential. The cash flow issue is mostly timing. You've got payments coming in, they're just not aligned with your expenses. Can you help? I can, but I need to be honest with you about what that looks like. I'd be offering you a line of credit to smooth out your cash flow, plus some growth capital to take on larger projects. In exchange, I'd want a small equity stake, 10%, and a seat on your advisory board. Not your board of directors, just advisory. I'd help you with strategy and connections, but you'd maintain full operational control. Clara felt her throat tighten. That sounds too good to be true. It's a good deal, because your company is a good investment. Adrian's right about one thing. You've been underestimating yourself. Marcus leaned back. Look, I've seen your father's work before. Not with him directly, but I've seen the aftermath. He's good at finding vulnerable companies and making himself look like the only option. But you're not as vulnerable as he wants you to think you are. My creditors, I can talk to them too. If you're bringing in a legitimate investor who's offering to help stabilize your finances, they have no reason to sell your debt to your father. They'd rather keep you as a functioning client than get caught up in whatever mess he's creating. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. The second investor meeting that afternoon was similar. A woman named Sandra Liu, who ran a small fund specializing in women-owned businesses. Her offer was slightly different. Less equity stake, more structured mentorship, access to a network of other founders dealing with similar challenges. By the time Clara left that meeting, she had 2 solid offers and a completely different picture of her situation. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't cornered. She had options. She called Adrian from her car. Both meetings went well, she said. Really well. Marcus thinks he can have term sheets ready by tomorrow. That's great. She could hear the relief in his voice. How are you feeling? Less terrified, still angry. Anger's useful. It means you're not giving up. Adrian, why are you doing all this? Really? You keep saying you want to help, but this is beyond help. You're restructuring your entire life to deal with my family drama. He was quiet for a moment. Can I be honest? Please. When my wife died, I spent about 6 months just trying to survive. Getting Emma through it, getting myself through it, figuring out how to be a single parent. And then I had about 6 months where I was just angry. At the driver who hit her car. At the universe. At myself for every moment I'd taken for granted. He paused. And then I had this moment where I realized the anger wasn't helping. It wasn't bringing her back. But what I could do was use everything I'd learned about loss and vulnerability to make sure other people didn't get victimized when they were down. So I started taking cases like your father's. People who exploit grief, who exploit trust, who exploit family bonds. It became what I do. So this is about your wife. This is about making something meaningful out of something terrible. And yeah, maybe there's some of that in wanting to help you. But Clara, it's also about you. About watching someone finally see their own worth after years of being told they don't have any. That matters. Clara felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Thank you. Thank me when this is over. That night, Clara's phone rang at 11. Vivian. Against her better judgment, Clara answered. Finally. Vivian sounded exhausted. Do you have any idea what the last 24 hours have been like? Mom's having panic attacks. Dad's locked himself in his study, and I'm caught in the middle of whatever is happening. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle. Clara, what is going on? Dad says he was trying to help you, and you threw it back in his face. But the way you talked at dinner, it sounded like you think he's trying to hurt you. That's because he is. Silence. Then, that's insane. Is it? Vivian, have you actually looked at the deal he was offering me? No? Why would I? Because if you had, you'd see exactly what I saw. It's not a partnership, it's a takeover. Dad wouldn't do that, not to you. Wouldn't he? When has Dad ever done anything that wasn't about his own benefit? That's not fair. Isn't it? Clara felt 30 years of frustration rising up. Vivian, you've spent our entire lives being the favorite. You've never had to fight for Dad's attention or approval because he just gave it to you. So maybe you don't see what he's really like when he's not getting what he wants. That's not true. I've worked just as hard. I'm not saying you haven't worked hard. I'm saying you've never been invisible. You've never had to prove yourself over and over just to be seen. And now that Dad sees something he wants from me, suddenly I matter. But only as an asset, only as something he can use. As if Vivian was crying, Clara could hear it in her voice. You really believe that? I've seen the evidence, Viv. I've seen what he does. I've talked to other people he's done this to. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern. I can't believe this. This is our family. I know, and that's what makes it so hard. Vivian hung up without saying goodbye. Clara sat in the dark and felt the last threads of her old life unraveling. Wednesday morning, Clara woke up to an email from her bank. Her accounts had been frozen pending an investigation into irregularities. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding, and knew exactly what had happened. She called Adrian. He's making his move, she said. My accounts are frozen. When did this happen? The email's time-stamped at 6 this morning, which means he filed whatever complaint triggered this late yesterday. He's accelerating his timeline. Adrian's voice was tight with controlled anger. He knows you've been talking to investors. Someone must have told him. Who would? Clara stopped. Vivian. I told Vivian last night that I'd seen evidence. She must have told him. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that we're running out of time. Can you get to my office in an hour? Where's your office? He gave her an address in the financial district. And bring everything, all your documents, all the offers from Marcus and Sandra, everything. We're going to war. Adrian's office was on the 20th floor of a glass building with a view of the harbor. It was smaller than Clara had expected. Just a few rooms, no fancy reception area. Adrian met her at the elevator looking like he hadn't slept. Come on, I've got everything set up. His main office was covered in papers, 3 computer screens displaying different documents, a whiteboard covered in what looked like a timeline with connections drawn between different events. This is everything I have on your father, Adrian said. Every deal, every pattern, every person he's hurt. And this, he pulled up a new document, is everything he's done to you specifically. The inquiries to your creditors, the research into your finances, the manufactured crisis with your bank accounts. I've got witnesses who'll testify that he explicitly told them he was planning to acquire your company with or without your consent. Clara stared at the screens. Where did you get all this? I'm good at my job, and I've been working on this for 3 months. He turned to face her. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to compile all of this into a comprehensive report. Then we're going to send copies to your father, to your creditors, to the bank that froze your accounts, and to the business press. The press? The threat of going to the press. We're not going to actually do it unless we have to. But your father needs to understand that if he continues down this path, his reputation is going to be destroyed. That's the only leverage we have. He'll never back down from a threat. Then we'll have to make it real enough that he has no choice. They spent the next 6 hours building the case. Adrian walked Clara through every piece of evidence, every connection, every moment that showed pattern and intent. He had recordings of phone calls, email trails, financial documents that painted a picture of systematic manipulation. Around 3 in the afternoon, Clara's phone rang. Her father. Adrian nodded at her. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." Clara did, her hand shaking slightly. "Hello?" "Clara." Her father's voice was cold. "I think we need to talk." "I don't have anything to say to you." "That's unfortunate because I have quite a bit to say to you. Your accounts are frozen because the bank flagged some concerning activity, irregular transfers, inconsistent reporting. It happens sometimes with small businesses that aren't properly managed. There's nothing irregular about my accounts." "The bank seems to disagree. But here's the thing, Clara, I might be able to help with that. If we were working together, if your company was part of my larger organization, this kind of scrutiny wouldn't happen. You'd have the protection of my reputation, my resources." Clara looked at Adrian. He was recording the call, she realized, getting every word. "So you're saying," Clara said slowly, "that if I agree to your deal, the bank investigation goes away?" "I'm saying that certain problems become easier to solve when you have the right support. Problems can be made to disappear, or they can be allowed to get worse. It's really up to you." Adrian was gesturing at her, mouthing words she couldn't quite read. Then he held up his phone with a text. "Keep him talking. Get him to say it explicitly." "Dad, are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a solution. There's a difference." "What if I don't want your solution? What if I find another way?" "There is no other way, Clara. I've made sure of that." His voice shifted, becoming almost gentle. "Sweetheart, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to save you from yourself. You're in over your head and you're too stubborn to see it, but I see it. I've always seen it. You're not built for this. You never were." Clara felt fury rising in her throat. "You don't know what I'm built for." "I know you better than you know yourself. I've watched you your whole life, always struggling, always trying to prove something, and I've watched you fail over and over because you don't have what it takes. But that's okay. That's why I'm here, to catch you when you fall." "I'm not falling." "You already have. You just haven't hit the ground yet." He paused. "The offer expires Friday at 5 p.m. After that, things are going to get very difficult for you. I suggest you think carefully about your next move." He hung up. Clara looked at Adrian, who was staring at his phone with an expression somewhere between triumph and disgust. "Tell me you got all of that," Clara said. "Every word. He just explicitly admitted to manufacturing your financial crisis and using it as leverage to force you into signing his deal. That's coercion. That's fraud. That's about a dozen different things that might not be technically criminal, but are definitely actionable. What do we do now?" "Now we show him what he's up against." Adrian spent the next 2 hours crafting a document that was part legal brief, part investigative report, part warning shot. It laid out everything: the pattern of behavior, the targeting of vulnerable businesses, the systematic exploitation of trust, and finally, the specific actions Gerald Voss had taken against his own daughter. At 7 p.m., Adrian sent it simultaneously to Gerald's personal email, his business email, and to the email accounts of his 3 closest business associates. The subject line read, Jussie, "Pattern of fraudulent business practices, documentation and evidence." Then they waited. The response came at 7:45. Gerald's lawyer called Adrian's office number. "Mr. Cross, this is Benjamin Walsh. I represent Gerald Voss. I've just been shown a rather inflammatory document that you apparently sent to my client." "That's correct." "I need you to understand that the allegations contained in this document are completely baseless. Mr. Voss has conducted all his business dealings in accordance with applicable laws and regulations. Any suggestion otherwise is defamatory. Then I'm sure he won't mind if this information becomes public. I'm planning to send it to the business press tomorrow morning unless we can reach an agreement. That would be a serious mistake. Mr. Voss is prepared to pursue all available legal remedies if you proceed with this course of action. I'll take that risk. But here's what I'm willing to offer. Mr. Voss immediately ceases all action against his daughter's company. He contacts the bank and resolves the account freeze. He abandons his attempts to purchase her outstanding debts. He formally withdraws his partnership offer, and in exchange, this document stays between us." "That's extortion." "No, that's negotiation. Extortion would be if I was asking for money. I'm asking for him to stop exploiting his daughter. There's a difference. Silence on the other end. Then, I need to consult with my client. You have until midnight. After that, the offer expires and this goes public. The lawyer hung up. Adrian looked at Clara, his expression unreadable. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait and see if he blinks. They waited. Clara ordered pizza, neither of them ate. Adrian made coffee that went cold in the cups. They sat in his office and watched the clock tick toward midnight, neither of them sure what they were hoping for. At 11:47, Adrian's phone rang. Cross? This is Gerald Voss. I want to speak to my daughter. Adrian looked at Clara. She nodded. You're on speaker. Clara's here. Clara, this has gotten out of hand. I think we need to sit down, just the two of us, and talk this through like adults. We tried that, Clara said. You tried to back me into a corner. I was trying to help you. I still am. But these accusations, this document, this is beyond the pale. I'm your father. Then act like it. What does that mean? Clara took a breath. It means you respect my choices. It means you stop treating me like I'm something you own. It means you back off and let me run my company the way I see fit. And if I don't agree? Then Adrian sends that document to every business reporter in the city, and we let them decide what to make of it. You'd really do that? You'd destroy your own father's reputation? You were willing to destroy my company. Why is your reputation more important than my life's work? The silence that followed was absolute. Then finally Gerald spoke, and his voice had changed. The warmth was gone. The manipulation was gone. What was left was cold and flat and real. Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll play hardball. I'll back off for now. But Clara, you need to understand something. You're making a very big mistake. You're burning a bridge you might need one day. I'll take that chance. You always were stubborn. I suppose I should have seen this coming. He paused. I'll call the bank in the morning. Your accounts will be unfrozen, and I'll withdraw the partnership offer. Consider this your victory. I don't want a victory. I just want you to leave me alone. Careful what you wish for. Goodbye, Clara. He hung up. Clara and Adrian sat in the silence that followed, neither of them quite believing it was over. Did that just happen? Clara asked finally. I think it did. He's really backing off? We'll know for sure tomorrow when your accounts are unfrozen. But yes, I think he's backing off. For now. Why does it feel like this isn't over? Because it probably isn't. Not completely. But you won this round. That matters. Clara put her head in her hands, suddenly exhausted. I just confronted my father. I just threatened to destroy his reputation. What kind of person does that? The kind who refuses to be a victim. I don't feel like a winner. I feel like I just nuked my entire family. You protected yourself. That's not the same as nuking your family. They'll either come around or they won't. But either way, you still have your company. You still have your life. Clara looked up at him. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. You just would have taken longer to get there. Adrian smiled slightly. You're stronger than you think, Clara. You always have been. She wanted to believe him. But sitting there in his office at nearly midnight, having just threatened her own father, she mostly just felt tired and sad, and like she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Mom just told me what happened. I don't understand any of this. I don't understand you anymore. Clara stared at the message and felt something final settle in her chest. She typed back, I know. I'm sorry. Then she turned off her phone and looked at Adrian. What happens now? Now you go home. You get some sleep. Tomorrow you call Marcus and accept his investment offer. You rebuild your company on your own terms. You move forward. And my family? That's up to them. But Clara, you can't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Not anymore. She knew he was right, but knowing it didn't make it hurt less. Clara woke up Thursday morning to an email from her bank confirming that the investigation had been closed and her accounts were fully accessible. No explanation, no apology, just a dry notification that the matter was resolved. She stared at it for a long time, trying to make herself feel relieved. Mostly, she felt numb. Her apartment was too quiet. She made coffee and checked her phone, still off from the night before. When she finally turned it on, 17 messages loaded. Most were from Vivian, 2 from her mother, nothing from her father. She deleted them all without reading and called Marcus Webb. "Clara, good morning. I was hoping to hear from you." "I want to accept your offer." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "If it's still on the table." "It absolutely is. I can have the paperwork ready by this afternoon. Can you come by my office around 3? I'll be there." "Clara, I heard through the grapevine that your father backed off. I don't know what you did, but well done." "I had help. Adrian Cross is good people. You're lucky to have him in your corner." After she hung up, Clara sat at her kitchen table and tried to process what had just happened. In less than a week, her entire world had shifted. She'd confronted her father, threatened to expose him, and somehow come out the other side with her company intact. She should feel triumphant. Instead, she felt hollowed out. Her phone rang. "Adrian, did you get the email from your bank?" he asked. "Yeah, it's done." "How are you feeling?" "I don't know. Disconnected, maybe. Like this all happened to someone else." "That's normal. You're in shock. It'll hit you later." He paused. "Listen, I know you probably want space, but Emma's been asking about you. She wants to know if you're okay. Would you want to grab lunch? Nothing heavy, just Emma thinks you need pancakes." Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling. Pancakes sound good. They met at a diner near Clara's office, the kind of place with vinyl booths and laminated menus and waitresses who'd been working there for decades. Emma was waiting in a booth when Clara arrived, coloring on the paper placemat with crayons the restaurant provided. "Clara!" Emma's face lit up. "Daddy said you had a really hard week." "I did, but it's getting better." "Did the mean person stop being mean?" Clara glanced at Adrian, who was sliding into the booth across from his daughter. "Yeah, they stopped." "Good. Being mean is stupid." Emma went back to her coloring with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old who'd just solved a complex moral problem. They ordered pancakes for Emma, an omelet for Clara that she picked at, coffee for Adrian that he drank too fast. Emma chattered about school and her friend who could do a cartwheel and the book her teacher was reading to the class about a mouse who went on adventures. "Are you and Daddy friends now?" Emma asked suddenly, looking at Clara with those bright, direct eyes. "I think so. Is that okay with you?" "Yeah, Daddy needs more friends. He's always working." "Emma," Adrian said, his ears going slightly pink, "it's true. Miss Carroll says you work too much." Miss Carroll is my sister," Adrian explained to Clara, "and she has opinions about everything. She says you need to get out more and meet people and stop acting like you're 90. I'm going to have a conversation with Aunt Carol about appropriate dinner table topics." Emma giggled and went back to her pancakes. Clara watched them, this easy back and forth, the way Adrian softened around his daughter, the way Emma clearly adored her father while also having no problem calling him out. It was so different from her own family dynamic that it made her chest ache. "Clara looks sad again," Emma observed. "I'm okay," Clara said quickly. "Just tired." Daddy says when grown-ups say they're tired, they usually mean something else. "Emma, eat your pancakes," Adrian said, but he was looking at Clara with concern. After lunch, Emma went to the bathroom and Clara and Adrian were left alone at the table. "She's right, you know," Clara said. "I'm not okay. I keep thinking about what my father said, about me burning a bridge I might need someday." "Do you regret it?" "No, but I'm scared of what comes next. My whole life, my family has been this fixed point. Even when they weren't great, they were there. And now I don't know what I have anymore." "You have yourself. You have your company. You have options you didn't have a week ago. Is that enough?" "I don't know, but it's a start." Adrian reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. The hard thing, but the right thing." Emma came skipping back, and the conversation shifted to safer territory. But Clara held on to those words. The hard thing, but the right thing. That afternoon, she signed Marcus's investment papers. The money hit her account Friday morning, and with it came a breathing room she hadn't felt in months. She paid down her most urgent debts, moved some money into reserves, and started making plans for the projects she'd had to put on hold. But the relief was tempered by the silence from her family. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was like she'd been erased. Friday evening, Clara was working late at her office when someone knocked on her door. She looked up to find Vivian standing in the hallway, her face blotchy from crying. "Can I come in?" Clara's first instinct was to say no, but something in her sister's expression made her pause. "Yeah, okay." Vivian came in and sat down in the chair across from Clara's desk, twisting her hands in her lap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I don't understand what happened," Vivian said finally. "1 week ago, we were at the lake house, and everything was normal. And now Dad won't talk about you, Mom keeps crying, and you're acting like we're strangers." "We are strangers, Viv. We always have been. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my life, about my work, about anything that mattered to me?" Vivian flinched. "I ask you things all the time." "No, you tell me things all the time about your life, your projects, your problems, and I listen because that's what I do. But when's the last time you actually listened to me?" "That's not true. I care about you." "I know you do, but caring about someone and seeing them aren't the same thing." Clara leaned back in her chair. "Viv, I've spent our entire lives being your supporting character. The quiet one, the serious one, the one who doesn't mind being in the background. And I let that happen because it was easier than fighting for space. But I'm tired. I'm so tired of being invisible." "You're not invisible to me. Then why didn't you see what Dad was doing? Why didn't you question it when he offered me a deal that was clearly designed to take control of my company? Why did you just accept his version of things without once asking if maybe I had a reason for being suspicious?" Vivian's face crumpled. "Because he's our father. Because I didn't want to believe he would hurt you." "But he did. And when I tried to tell you, you took his side." "I didn't take his side. I didn't understand. I still don't understand." Clara pulled out her laptop and turned it around so Vivian could see the screen. "This is the document Adrian compiled. It shows every business Dad has systematically destroyed over the last 8 years. Read it, all of it, and then tell me you don't understand." Vivian stared at the screen, her eyes moving over the text. Clara watched her sister's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something that looked like horror. "He did all of this?" Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. "All of it. And he was planning to do the same thing to me. The partnership he offered wasn't help. It was a trap." "But why? Why would he do this to you?" "Because he could. Because he saw an opportunity. Because in his mind, it's not personal. It's just business." Clara closed the laptop. "Viv, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt the family. I did this to protect myself. But I can't go back to how things were. I can't pretend everything is fine when it's not." Vivian was crying openly now. "What am I supposed to do? He's still my father. Mom's still my mother. I can't just cut them off." "I'm not asking you to, but I'm also not going to apologize for setting boundaries. If you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be on different terms. No more comparing us. No more dismissing what I do. No more pretending that our family dynamic is normal or healthy. I never meant to hurt you. I know, but intention isn't the same as impact. And the impact of 30 years of being positioned as your shadow is that I don't trust you to see me for who I actually am." Vivian stood up, looking lost. "I don't know how to fix this." "Maybe you can't. Maybe we just have to start over and see what happens." "Do you hate me?" The question was so raw, so vulnerable, that Clara felt something crack in her chest. "No, I don't hate you. But I don't know if I like who I am when I'm around you, and I need to figure out who I am without that." Vivian nodded, wiping at her face. "Okay, I'll give you space, but Clara, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I wasn't a better sister." After Vivian left, Clara sat in her office and cried for the first time since the whole thing started. Not for her father, not even really for Vivian, but for the family she'd thought she had, and the realization that it had never actually existed. The weekend passed in a strange blur. Clara threw herself into work, reorganizing her project timeline now that she had actual resources to work with. Saturday evening, Adrian texted her. "Emma wants to know if you'd like to come to the park tomorrow. No pressure, but she's been asking." Clara found herself saying yes. Sunday afternoon was cold but sunny, the kind of late winter day where you could almost believe spring was coming. Emma ran ahead to the playground while Adrian and Clara walked more slowly, their breath making clouds in the air. "How are you holding up?" Adrian asked. I'm functional. That's about all I can claim right now. That's more than nothing. Vivian came to see me Friday. She read the document. I think it broke something in her understanding of our father. How do you feel about that? Guilty, relieved, angry that it took documented evidence for her to believe me. Clara shoved her hands in her pockets. Is it always this complicated? Family? Yeah. It's the hardest thing there is because you can't just walk away without it costing you something. Did you have to walk away from anyone after your wife died? Adrian was quiet for a moment, watching Emma climb the monkey bars. Her parents, they wanted to take Emma, thought I couldn't raise her alone. It got ugly for a while. We don't talk anymore. I'm sorry. I'm not. They were wrong, and I wasn't going to let them take my daughter just because they were grieving their own way. He glanced at her. Sometimes protecting yourself means losing people you thought you'd have forever. It doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it hard. They reached the playground, and Emma called out for them to watch her on the swings. They stood side by side, pushing her higher while she shrieked with delight, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. This moment, simple, uncomplicated, real, felt more like family than anything she'd experienced in her parents' house. Monday morning brought a different kind of reckoning. Clara was at her office when her assistant buzzed her. Clara, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's your mother. Clara's stomach dropped. Send her in. Her mother appeared in the doorway, looking smaller than Clara remembered, her usual polish slightly dimmed. There were dark circles under her eyes. Clara, thank you for seeing me. I'm surprised you came. May I sit? Clara gestured to the chair. Her mother sat, setting her purse carefully in her lap with that precise control Clara knew too well. Your father told me what happened, his version, anyway. Her mother's voice was tight. He said you accused him of trying to steal your company, that you threatened him, that Adrian Cross poisoned you against your own family. Is that what you think happened? I don't know what to think. Gerald says one thing, Vivian says another, and you won't return my calls. Clara pulled up the document on her laptop and turned it toward her mother. This is what happened. Read it. Her mother stared at the screen for a long time. Clara watched her face, trying to read the emotions flickering across it. When her mother finally looked up, her eyes were red. This can't be real. It is. All of it. Names, dates, documentation. Your husband has been systematically destroying businesses for years, and he tried to do the same thing to me. But why? We don't need the money. We have everything. I don't think it's about money. I think it's about control, about winning, about being the smartest person in the room. Clara leaned forward. Mom, did you really not know? Her mother's hands were shaking. I knew he was aggressive in business. I knew he drove hard bargains, but this, she gestured at the laptop. This is different. This is cruel. Yes, it is. What am I supposed to do with this information? That's up to you. But I'm not going back to how things were. I can't. He's still your father. Is he? Because fathers are supposed to protect their children, not exploit them. Her mother stood up abruptly, her composure cracking. You don't understand what you're asking me to do. You're asking me to choose between my husband and my daughter. No. I'm asking you to choose between the truth and a comfortable lie. That's different. It's not different at all. Her mother's voice broke. Clara, I've been married to your father for 35 years. My entire adult life is built around him. I don't know how to... I know, and I'm not asking you to leave him or divorce him or anything like that. But I'm asking you to see him clearly, and to see me clearly. Not as Gerald's daughter, but as Clara. As someone separate from him. Her mother was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to wipe away with trembling fingers. I thought I was seeing you. All these years, I thought I knew you. You knew the version of me that fit into the family dynamic. The quiet one, the serious one, the one who didn't cause problems, but that's not all I am. Then who are you? The question hung between them, heavy with 30 years of misunderstanding. I'm still figuring that out, Clara said honestly, but I know I'm not who you and Dad needed me to be. Her mother gathered her purse and stood. I need time to think about this, to process. Take all the time you need. At the door, her mother paused. Clara, I do love you. I want you to know that. I know, but love isn't enough if it comes with the condition that I have to make myself smaller to receive it. After her mother left, Clara sat at her desk and felt the finality of it. Whatever came next, her family as she'd known it was over. There might be something else eventually, some new configuration built on honesty instead of comfortable lies. But the old structure was gone. She was still sitting there when Adrian called. I just got a very interesting phone call, he said, from your father's lawyer. Clara's pulse jumped. What did he want? To inform me that Gerald Voss is prepared to make a public statement acknowledging certain irregularities in his past business dealings. Nothing specific, just a vague acknowledgement that some of his practices may not have met the highest ethical standards. In exchange, he wants assurance that your documentation won't be released to the press. What did you tell him? I told him I'd discuss it with you. This is your decision, Clara. We have enough evidence to seriously damage his reputation. We could go public with this. Clara thought about her mother's face, the way she'd looked reading those documents. She thought about Vivian, struggling to reconcile the father she thought she knew with the man those pages revealed. She thought about the other families her father had destroyed, and whether they deserved to see him held accountable. If we go public, she said slowly, it destroys more than just him. It destroys my mother. It destroys whatever relationship Vivian and I might still salvage. It makes me the person who blew up her own family. Those are all true things, but they're also not your responsibility. Your father made these choices. The consequences are his to bear. But they won't just fall on him. They'll fall on everyone connected to him, and I don't know if I can live with that. Adrian was quiet for a moment. What do you want, Clara? Not what's fair, not what he deserves. What do you actually want? She closed her eyes and tried to find the answer underneath all the anger and hurt and exhaustion. I want to be left alone. I want to build my company without interference. I want my family to stop treating me like I'm less than. That's all I've ever wanted. Then that's what we ask for. A formal agreement that he stays out of your business, permanently. No contact unless you initiate it. No attempts to interfere with your company or your clients. He backs off completely, and in exchange, the documentation stays private. What about the other people he hurt? That's trickier. We can't unring that bell for them. But we can make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else going forward. We can put conditions on the agreement, that he discloses his past practices to any future business partners, that he submits to outside auditing for any new acquisitions. We can't get justice for what already happened, but we can prevent it from happening again. Clara thought about it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even completely satisfying. But it was realistic, and it gave her what she actually needed, freedom. Okay, let's do it. Adrian spent the next 2 days negotiating the terms with her father's lawyer. Clara stayed out of it, focusing on her work, on rebuilding the routines that had been shattered. She met with her team, reviewed project timelines, started planning for the growth that Marcus's investment made possible. Wednesday afternoon, Adrian called. It's done. The agreement is signed. Your father agrees to complete non-interference with your business and your life. He's putting it in writing that any future partnerships will include full disclosure of his past practices, and he's agreed to an independent audit of his current holdings. And in exchange? The documentation stays private, but Clara, I kept copies. If he violates this agreement in any way, all bets are off. Thank you for everything. You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again. You didn't have to do any of this. Yes, I did. Emma would have been disappointed in me if I'd let a bully win. Clara laughed despite herself. Tell Emma I said thank you too. Tell her yourself. She wants to know if you'd like to come to dinner Friday night. Nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever vegetables I can convince her to eat. I'd like that. Friday evening, Clara drove to Adrian's apartment building with a bottle of wine and a nervous flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with her father or her family, and everything to do with the man who'd somehow become the most important person in her life in the span of 2 weeks. Adrian's apartment was smaller than hers, with mismatched furniture and Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator. It was warm and lived in and completely unpretentious. Emma opened the door wearing a princess costume and a serious expression. Clara, do you like my dress? I love it. Daddy says we're having spaghetti, but I have to eat 3 pieces of broccoli first. Do you think that's fair? I think that's very fair. That's what Daddy said. Emma sighed dramatically. Grown-ups always agree with each other. Adrian appeared from the kitchen, wearing jeans and a sweater with a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. Emma, stop interrogating our guest. Clara, come in. Fair warning, the sauce is from a jar and the salad is mostly iceberg lettuce. Sounds perfect. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Emma talked nonstop about school and her friend Mia and the caterpillar they were raising in their classroom. Adrian tried to enforce the three-piece broccoli rule while also trying to carry on an adult conversation. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in months. After dinner, Emma convinced Clara to play a board game that seemed to have rules Emma was making up as they went along. Adrian sat on the floor with them, occasionally interjecting that, no, you couldn't just decide you won because you felt like it, while Emma argued that it was her game so she could make the rules. Eventually, Emma started yawning and Adrian declared bedtime. Say goodnight to Clara, Bear. Emma hugged Clara with the unselfconscious affection of a child. Will you come back next week? If your dad invites me. Daddy, invite Clara for next week. Emma, go brush your teeth. I'll come read you a story in a minute. After Emma disappeared into the bathroom, Adrian turned to Clara. You don't have to come back if this is too much. I know Emma can be a lot. She's not too much. She's perfect. She really likes you. She doesn't warm up to people this fast usually. The feeling's mutual. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Clara, Daddy, I'm ready, Emma called from her bedroom. Hold that thought. He disappeared down the hall, and Clara heard him reading a story about a bear who went on an adventure, doing different voices for each character. She wandered around the living room looking at the photographs on the shelves. Emma as a baby, Emma's first day of school, Emma and Adrian at what looked like a beach, and one photo of a woman with dark hair and a bright smile, holding a tiny infant, Adrian's wife, Clara realized. Emma's mother. That was Sarah. Adrian's voice came from behind her. Clara hadn't heard him come back. Emma was 2 months old in that picture. She was beautiful. She was. Adrian came to stand beside her, looking at the photo. For a long time, I couldn't look at these pictures without falling apart. But Emma needed to know her mother, even if she couldn't remember her. So I kept them out. That must have been hard. Everything was hard for a while, but it got easier. Not better exactly, but easier. You learn to live around the grief instead of in it. He turned to face her. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. I'm not looking for someone to replace Sarah. I'm not looking to fill a hole or fix something broken. Emma and I are okay as we are. Clara's heart was pounding. Okay, but I'd like to see where this goes with you. If you're interested, I'm interested. But Adrian, I'm a mess right now. My family is imploding, I'm barely holding my company together, and I don't know who I am without all the old patterns I've been living by. I know, that's okay. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm just asking if you'd like to keep having dinner with Emma and me on Friday nights, and maybe see what happens from there. Clara looked at him standing there in his lived-in apartment with his daughter's artwork on the walls and his dead wife's photo on the shelf, and she felt something click into place that had been misaligned her entire life. Yeah, she said. I'd like that. He smiled, and it was different from his usual careful expression, wider, more open, reaching all the way to his eyes. Good. Because Emma's already planning the menu for next week, and I was going to be very disappointed if I had to tell her you weren't coming. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Adrian stepped closer and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me, for fighting for yourself, for being brave enough to change everything. I didn't do it alone. No, but you did do it. That matters. Clara left an hour later, driving home through the dark streets with her hand still tingling from where Adrian had held it. When she got home, there was an email waiting from Vivian. I talked to Dad today, really talked to him, not just listened while he explained things away. He admitted some of it. Not all of it, but enough. I don't know what happens now with us as a family, but I wanted you to know that I believe you. I should have believed you from the start. I'm sorry I didn't. I hope someday we can figure out how to be sisters for real, not just the roles we've been playing. Love, Viv. Clara read it 3 times, then wrote back, Thank you for believing me. I don't know what happens now either, but I'm willing to try if you are. She hit send and closed her laptop. Outside her window, the city lights glittered against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, her father was learning to live with the consequences of his choices. Her mother was grappling with truths she'd avoided for decades. Vivian was starting to question the family dynamics she'd always taken for granted. And Clara was here, in her own apartment, with her company secure and her future uncertain, and the possibility of something real with someone who saw her completely. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined 2 weeks ago. It wasn't neat or resolved or perfectly satisfying, but it was hers. Finally, entirely hers. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Clara threw herself into work with Marcus's investment backing her moves, finally able to take on the project she'd been turning down for months. The community center broke ground on schedule, and she hired 2 junior architects to help handle the expanding workload. Her office felt different now, less like a space she was desperately trying to keep afloat, and more like something solid she was actively building. Friday dinners with Adrian and Emma became a fixed point in her week. Sometimes they cooked, sometimes they ordered takeout. But always Emma would monopolize the conversation with whatever was happening in her 6-year-old world, and Adrian would catch Clara's eye across the table with that small smile that made her feel seen in a way she was still getting used to. On a Tuesday morning in early March, Clara was reviewing blueprints when her assistant buzzed. "Clara, your sister's here. Should I send her in?" Clara's hand stilled on the page. She and Vivian had exchanged a few cautious emails since that first one, but they hadn't seen each other in person. "Yeah, okay." Vivian appeared in the doorway looking uncertain, holding 2 coffee cups from the place near Clara's office. "I remembered you liked the vanilla latte. I hope that's still right." "It is. Thanks." Clara took the cup, and they stood there awkwardly for a moment. "Do you want to sit?" Vivian sat, setting her own coffee down carefully. She looked thinner than Clara remembered, the usual polish dimmed by something that looked like exhaustion. "I've been going to therapy," Vivian said abruptly. "Started 2 weeks ago. My therapist thinks I need to have some honest conversations with you, and I keep chickening out, but she says that's part of the problem. So I'm here before I can talk myself out of it again." Clara set down her own coffee. "Okay. I need you to know that I've been thinking about everything that happened, not just what Dad did to you, but everything before that. The way I talked about you at that dinner, the way I've always positioned us as opposites, like that was cute or funny instead of diminishing." Vivian's voice cracked slightly. "Clara, I don't think I've been a good sister, maybe ever." No, let me finish, please." Vivian took a shaky breath. "I've been the pretty one, the charming one, the one everyone notices for so long that I didn't even realize I was building that identity by making you the opposite. The serious one, the quiet one, the one who doesn't need attention because she's above all that. Except you did need attention. You needed to be seen, and I made sure you weren't because it kept me at the center of everything." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I finally understand what you meant when you said I didn't see you. I thought I did. I thought I knew you. But I only knew the version of you that made sense in the story where I was the star." Vivian wiped at her eyes. "And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for every comparison, every dismissive comment, every time I made you feel less than. You were right. I never meant to be cruel, but that doesn't change the impact." "No, it doesn't. Can you forgive me? Eventually?" "Not now. I know I don't deserve it now, but someday?" Clara looked at her sister, really looked at her, and saw someone struggling with the same thing she'd been struggling with. The realization that the family dynamic they'd grown up in was toxic, that the roles they'd been assigned were damaging, that changing meant losing the comfort of familiar patterns, even when those patterns hurt. "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "I want to. But Viv, I need you to understand something. Apologizing is step 1. The hard part is actually changing the behavior, not comparing us anymore, not positioning yourself as better, or more interesting, or more important. Can you actually do that?" "I'm trying. I'm really trying." Vivian's voice was small. "My therapist says I use you as a mirror to make myself feel good, and I need to find my self-worth somewhere else. Which sounds easy, except I don't actually know how to do that." "Then figure it out. But don't expect me to help you with it. I spent 30 years making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. I'm done with that." "I know. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm just asking if we can try to be sisters differently." If you're willing. Clara thought about it. The old instinct was to say yes immediately, to smooth things over, to prioritize family peace over her own boundaries. But she'd learned something over the past few weeks, that love without boundaries wasn't actually love, it was obligation. We can try, she said finally, but it has to be different, Viv. Real conversations, not surface ones. Mutual respect, not one of us always deferring to the other. And if you slip back into old patterns, I'm going to call you on it, every time. Okay, I can work with that. Vivian smiled tentatively. Thank you for not just shutting me out completely. I thought about it, but I realized I'd rather try to build something real than just burn everything down. They talked for another hour, carefully navigating topics that had always been landmines. Vivian admitted she'd been avoiding their father since everything came out, that she was struggling with how to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the evidence of what he'd done. Clara told her about Marcus's investment, about the project she was finally able to pursue, about how strange and freeing it felt to be building her company on her own terms. When Vivian finally left, Clara felt something shift. Not resolution exactly, but possibility. The kind that came with acknowledging damage honestly instead of papering over it. That Friday, Clara showed up at Adrian's apartment to find Emma unusually subdued. She sat on the couch, coloring, but without her usual running commentary. Is she okay? Clara asked Adrian quietly in the kitchen. Rough day at school. One of the kids told her she couldn't play with them because she doesn't have a mom. Adrian's jaw was tight. I've been trying to explain that families come in all shapes, but 6-year-old social politics are brutal. Clara's heart squeezed. Can I talk to her? Be my guest. Clara went into the living room and sat down on the floor next to Emma. Hey, your dad said you had a hard day. Emma nodded without looking up from her coloring. Want to tell me about it? Mia said I couldn't be in the Mom's Day craft group because I don't have a mom. She said it's a rule. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but her crayon was pressing so hard it was leaving marks through the paper. That's a really mean thing to say. She said her mom told her everyone has a mom, so if I don't have one, it means I'm weird. Clara felt fury rising in her chest, but she kept her voice gentle. You're not weird. You have a mom. She's just not here anymore. That doesn't make your family any less real. But I don't remember her. Daddy says that's okay, but I feel bad because I should remember my own mom. Emma, look at me. Clara waited until the little girl met her eyes. You were really little when your mom died. It's not your fault you don't remember her. And the fact that she's not here doesn't mean she didn't love you. She loved you so much. How do you know? Because I see how your dad talks about her. I see the pictures he keeps so you can know her face. I see how hard he works to make sure you know you're loved. Your mom did that. She made sure you had a dad who would love you enough for both parents. That's what moms do. They love their kids even when they can't be there. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Do you think my mom would like me? Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. I think she'd be so proud of you. I think she'd love how smart and funny and brave you are. I think she'd watch you do cartwheels and play with your friends and color at the kitchen table, and she'd think you were the most amazing person in the world. Like you think? Like I think. Emma set down her crayon and climbed into Clara's lap, something she'd never done before. Clara wrapped her arms around this small, warm person and felt something click into place. Not maternal exactly, but protective, loving, real. Adrian appeared in the doorway, saw them, and his expression did something that made Clara's chest tight. Later, after Emma had gone to bed and Clara and Adrian were sitting on the couch with wine, neither of them was really drinking. He turned to her. Thank you for what you said to her about Sarah. That was... His voice caught. That was perfect. I meant it, every word. I know, that's what made it perfect. He set down his wine and took her hand. Clara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know I'm not saying it because I'm expecting anything back. I'm saying it because I don't want to waste time pretending I feel less than I do. Her heart was pounding. Okay? I'm falling for you. Maybe I already have fallen. I don't know exactly when it happened. Probably sometime between watching you stand up to your father and watching you hold my daughter while she cried about her dead mother. He laughed shakily. This wasn't the plan. I was just supposed to help you deal with your father and then move on to the next case. But then you turned out to be funny and smart and brave and so much stronger than you gave yourself credit for, and now I can't imagine not having you in my life." Clara felt like all the air had been pulled from the room. "Adrian, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." "Can I say something anyway?" "Of course. I'm falling for you too. For both of you. And it terrifies me because 3 weeks ago my entire life imploded, and I'm still figuring out who I am without all the old patterns, and I don't know if I'm ready for this. But I also know that when I'm here with you and Emma, I feel more like myself than I have in 30 years. So maybe I'm not ready, but I'm willing to try." Adrian's smile was the most unguarded thing she'd ever seen on his face. "We can try together, no pressure, no expectations, just seeing where this goes." "That sounds good." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative and perfect, and when they broke apart, Clara was smiling. "Emma's going to be insufferable when she finds out," Adrian said. "She already knows. That kid sees everything. She gets that from her mother. Sarah always knew what I was feeling before I did." "Tell me about her? Not because I'm worried or jealous, but because she's part of your story, and I want to know your story." So Adrian told her about meeting Sarah in college, about their quick wedding and quicker pregnancy, about how Sarah had been funny and impatient and deeply kind, about the random Tuesday afternoon when a drunk driver had run a red light and ended everything, about the months that followed trying to be a parent while drowning in grief. "I don't think you ever get over something like that," he said. "You just learn to live with it, and eventually you find reasons to be happy again, even though the grief is still there. Emma's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the reason I kept going when everything felt impossible." They talked until late, the conversation flowing easily between serious and light, past and present. When Clara finally left around midnight, Adrian walked her to her car and kissed her goodnight in a way that promised more eventually when they were both ready. The next few weeks unfolded in layers. Claire's community center project hit a snag with permits, and instead of panicking, she worked through it methodically with her team. Vivian texted her occasionally, careful not to overstep, slowly building something that looked like actual sisterhood. Her mother sent a brief email saying she needed more time, but wanted Clara to know she loved her. There was no word from her father, and Clara found she was okay with that. One evening in late March, Clara was working late when her phone rang. Richard Hastings. "Clara, I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. What's up?" "I wanted you to know something. Your father came to see me last week. He wanted to borrow money to cover some debts that came due unexpectedly. I turned him down." Claire's pulse jumped. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's been doing this for years, leveraging relationships, calling in favors, building himself up by taking from others. And I'm done enabling it. I should have stopped him years ago, but I didn't want to see what he was. Adrian showed me. And you confirmed it by standing up to him." Richard paused. "I just wanted you to know that you weren't wrong about him, and that some of us are paying attention now. Thank you for telling me. Take care of yourself, Clara, and take care of Adrian and Emma. They're good people." After he hung up, Clara sat in her office and felt the final piece click into place. Her father's empire was cracking, not because she'd destroyed it, but because he'd built it on exploitation, and eventually that foundation always crumbles. She wasn't responsible for his choices or their consequences. She was only responsible for her own life, her own company, her own future. That Friday, Emma greeted Clara at the door with barely contained excitement. "Clara, guess what? We're going to the lake tomorrow and Daddy said you could come if you want." "The lake?" "Richard's lake house," Adrian explained, appearing behind his daughter. "He offered us the place for the weekend. Apparently he feels guilty about introducing you to your father's business associates. I told him that wasn't his fault, but he insisted. Emma's been planning this all week. We're going to ice skate. The lake is still frozen, and it's safe, and Daddy said we could if there's a grown-up watching." Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. Clara looked at Adrian, who was watching her with that quiet attention she'd come to recognize. "What do you think?" he asked. "Want to come?" She thought about the lake house, about the weekend that had started everything, about meeting Adrian across that dinner table and having him see her when no one else did, about the version of herself who'd driven up that gravel road 3 weeks ago, still invisible, still accepting that role as natural. "Yeah," she said. "I'd like that." Saturday morning, they drove out to the lake house through melting snow and early spring sun. Emma chattered from the back seat about everything and nothing, while Adrian drove and Clara watched the landscape change from city to suburbs to rural roads. When they pulled up to the house, Clara felt a strange sense of symmetry. This was where it had started, the weekend that had cracked open her life and forced her to see everything clearly. They spent the day exploring. Emma ran through the house claiming rooms for her stuffed animals while Adrian and Clara unpacked supplies. Later, they walked down to the lake, which was indeed still frozen solid, the ice gray and thick under the afternoon sun. "Is it safe?" Clara asked. Adrian tested the edge with his boot. "Richard said it's been cold enough that it should be fine near the shore. We'll stay close to the edge." They laced up the ice skates Adrian had brought. Emma had her own small pair, and he'd borrowed an extra set for Clara. Emma took off immediately, her movements unsteady but fearless, while Clara stepped carefully onto the ice. "I haven't done this since I was a kid," she admitted. "It's like riding a bike, except colder and more likely to result in bruises." Adrian took her hand. "Come on, I've got you." They skated in slow circles near the shore, while Emma zoomed around them, occasionally wiping out but always jumping back up. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cold enough that their breath made clouds. "This is nice," Clara said. "Being here. It's like closing a circle." "Is it different than last time?" "Everything's different than last time." Clara looked at him. "Last time I was here, I was still trying to be the person my family needed me to be. I was still invisible, still accepting that as normal. And then you looked at me across that dinner table and said you weren't looking at Vivian, and something cracked open that I didn't know was closed. I meant what I said that night. I still mean it. I know. That's the amazing part. You saw me before I saw myself," Emma called out from across the ice, waving at them. "Watch me do a spin." They watched as she attempted a spin that ended with her sitting hard on the ice, laughing. Adrian skated over to help her up while Clara stayed where she was, feeling the solid ice beneath her and the cold air around her, and the life she was building instead of the life that had been built for her. When Adrian came back, he pulled her closer, his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm happy, really, genuinely happy, and I'm not used to that." "Get used to it. I plan on making you happy as often as possible." "That's a big promise." "I'm a big promise kind of guy." He kissed her forehead. "Clara, I know we're still figuring this out. I know you're still rebuilding your life and dealing with your family and learning who you are without all the old patterns. But I want you to know that Emma and we're here for whatever this becomes. No pressure, no expectations, just here." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that came from feeling safe enough to be vulnerable. "I'm here too, for both of you." They skated until the sun set completely, and Emma started complaining that her feet were cold. Back at the house, Adrian made hot chocolate while Emma described her skating adventures in elaborate detail, demonstrating the falls with dramatic flair. "And then I went whoosh, and then I fell boom, and then I got back up zoom." She was lying on the couch in her pajamas, clearly winding down despite her energetic storytelling. "Emma, you need to sleep eventually," Adrian said, "but I'm not tired." "Your yawns say different." "Those aren't real yawns. Those are just practice yawns for when I'm actually tired." Clara laughed. "Practice yawns, that's a new one." "Clara, will you read me a story?" Emma sat up, suddenly focused. "Daddy always does different voices, but you have a nice reading voice. I heard you reading the recipe last Friday." "Emma," Adrian started. "It's okay," Clara said. "I'd love to." They went upstairs to the room Emma had claimed, and Clara read from a book about a girl who found a magic door. Emma interrupted constantly with questions and observations, but by the end of the story she was fighting to keep her eyes open. "Clara," Emma's voice was sleepy, "are you going to be my dad's girlfriend?" Clara glanced at Adrian, who was standing in the doorway trying not to smile. "Would that be okay with you?" "Yeah, you're nice and you make Daddy smile more, and you're good at reading stories." "Well, those are excellent qualifications. And you don't get mad when I talk a lot." "I like when you talk a lot. You tell good stories." Emma smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "I like you, Clara." "I like you too, Emma." By the time Clara finished tucking her in, Emma was asleep. Clara and Adrian stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe evenly under her blanket. "She really does like you," Adrian whispered. "I was worried about introducing someone new into her life, but she took to you immediately." "The feeling's mutual. She's amazing, Adrian. You're doing such a good job with her." "We're doing a good job. She needs people besides just me." Sarah would have wanted that, for Emma to have people who love her. They went back downstairs and settled on the couch with wine and the fire Adrian had built. Outside, the lake stretched dark and frozen under a clear sky full of stars. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said after a while. "Always. That first night at dinner, when you said you weren't looking at Vivian, did you know what that would do to me? How much I needed to hear that?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I knew you'd been overlooked. I could see it in the way you carried yourself, the way you let your sister dominate the conversation, the way you didn't argue when she positioned you as less than. I knew that someone needed to see you. I didn't know it would change everything. I just knew it was true." "It did change everything. You changed everything." "You changed everything. I just showed you what was already there." "Either way, I'm grateful." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "For you finding me. For you fighting for me. For you seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For what it's worth, I'm grateful too. For you trusting me. For you being brave enough to fight for yourself. For you letting me and Emma into your life." He kissed the top of her head. "This wasn't the plan, you know. I was supposed to help you deal with your father and then move on. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you." Clara's breath caught. "You love me?" "Yeah, I do." "Is that too fast?" "It probably is. Emma's therapist would probably say I'm emotionally overcompensating or projecting or something." "But it's true. I love you, Clara Voss." She turned to face him, this man who'd appeared in her life at exactly the right moment and refused to let her stay invisible. "I love you too, both of you, and it's terrifying and too fast, and probably a terrible idea given that my life just imploded, but it's true." He kissed her then, properly, and it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before, safe and new and entirely right. They stayed at the lake house through Sunday, spending the day building a snowman with Emma and cooking meals together, and having the kind of easy, comfortable time that comes when people fit together naturally. Emma seemed to sense the shift between Clara and her father, treating it with the pragmatic acceptance of a child who just wanted the adults in her life to be happy. Sunday evening, as they were packing up to leave, Clara stood at the window looking out at the lake one last time. "What are you thinking?" Adrian came to stand beside her. "That the last time I was here, I drove away not knowing what came next, and now I'm leaving knowing exactly what comes next. My life. The one I'm building. The one where I'm not invisible anymore." "You were never invisible. People just weren't looking." "You were looking." "I was looking." He took her hand. "Ready to go home?" Clara thought about the word home, her apartment, her office, her company, her life. Friday dinners and Emma's chatter and Adrian's quiet presence. Her sister slowly learning to see her differently. Her mother processing truths she'd avoided for decades. Her father learning that exploitation eventually costs more than it gains. None of it was perfect. All of it was real. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They drove back to the city as the sun set, Emma falling asleep in the back seat, Adrian's hand occasionally reaching over to take Clara's. When they pulled up to her apartment building, he turned off the car and looked at her. "Same time next Friday?" "I'll be there." Emma's planning the menu. Apparently we're having tacos and ice cream. In that order. "Sounds perfect." "You're perfect." "I'm really not." "Perfect for me then." Clara kissed him, then got out of the car and watched them drive away. She went up to her apartment and found it exactly as she'd left it. Small, neat, hers. She made tea, she didn't drink, and sat by the window looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. "Mom wants to have lunch, just the three of us. I told her I wouldn't pressure you, but she asked me to ask. No pressure." Clara stared at the message for a long time. Then she wrote back, "Tell her okay. But we do it on my terms. My choice of restaurant, and we leave if it gets ugly." Vivian's response came immediately. "Deal. Thank you for trying." Another text, this time from Marcus. "Your Q1 numbers look great. You're on track for the growth we projected. Well done. And then Adrian. Emma wants you to know that she's decided you're officially part of our family now. I told her that was up to you, but she's pretty certain. Just wanted to give you fair warning. Also, I love you. Sleep well. Clara felt something warm unfold in her chest. She looked around her apartment, at the furniture she'd chosen, the art she'd collected, the life she'd built. And for the first time in 30 years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because someone else had decided that's where she belonged, but because she'd chosen it. She'd fought for it. She'd refused to stay invisible. She typed back to Adrian, "Tell Emma I accept, and I love you too, both of you." Then she set down her phone and looked out at the city stretching before her, full of possibility, full of challenge, full of life that was entirely, completely, finally hers. The overlooked architect had been seen, and what she'd built from that moment forward would be built on her own terms, with people who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, a real one.